Hello, good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for joining our Voices for Innovation webinar on cybersecurity. It's going to be, I think, a great conversation today on what is a hot topic. And it's timely because October is National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So we wanted to have a webinar with one of our policy experts here at Microsoft, Jacob Crisp. And Jacob Crisp is our Director of Cybersecurity Policy and recent new person who joined Microsoft a few months ago, but has already been working on a number of really interesting issues that he's going to talk to you about today. Before joining Microsoft, Jacob has had a number of roles in the government. He's worked in Congress. He's worked at the administration level, and he's also worked and served in the intelligence community. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jacob to go through his presentation. If you have questions during his presentation, please feel free, if you're on Skype for Business, to type it into the conversation window, and Jacob will address them as he goes through his presentation. So with that, Jacob, the floor is yours.
Well, hi everyone. Good afternoon, and for some of those, good morning. I'm really excited to be here to talk with everyone today. Let me just give you a quick kind of overview, and we can go from there. I plan to present for about 25 to 30 minutes, and then we can open it up for questions. But if you guys feel like you've got questions as we go throughout, we can both devote time at the end, but also just raise them throughout, and I think that will be helpful. And Jonathan can manage that a little bit. So just to tell you a little bit about my role here at Microsoft, and I work here in DC, and I primarily view my role as a matchmaking role and sort of someone who can reach back into Redmond and also throughout the Microsoft network and help bring our expertise to various issues that we see on a day-to-day basis. And so, here in DC, I do a lot of outreach on the Hill and help engage on the legislative side, but also perform to some degree some advisory and counsel roles as I do outreach on Microsoft's behalf to a number of different cybersecurity issues. And it's also important here in DC to coordinate not just on the Hill side, but also in the executive branch. And so obviously I do do a number of engagements with various agencies and the administration on issues that we see pressing both in the future, but also currently in Microsoft's view. And among other things, I also do a lot of coordination and outreach with our peers here in industry and throughout DC and across the country to help them understand where we stand on issues, as well as where I think as an industry we should be standing on issues, which is an important outreach issue as well. That way we can come in as a unified voice and inform, educate, and advise on issues that impact the cyberspace. So when we talk about the commitments Microsoft makes on a day-to-day basis, there are a number of different ways that we can make those commitments become a reality. And so on the public policy and advocacy side, as you can imagine, issues pop up not just on the threat landscape, but also things from IT modernization and technology to IoT to engagement in technology trends. So those are some ways we're very public on some of the issues, and in other ways, it's very clear where Microsoft stands and what we're doing, but also on the flip side, there's issues where we play a more of an informal role and we can provide advice and counsel. And so today on the agenda, let's talk a little bit about three different primary pillars as we see on the cybersecurity front. So we're going to talk and start with, and the way I look at this is sort of three different buckets. And we're going to start with what we call the global journey towards internet adoption, the opportunities and risks associated with it. And so as we sort of have seen over the last decade or two, although there are great opportunities and advancement in technologies, there's also the tail that comes with the risks and opportunities as we do go through the evolution in technology. And so that's sort of bucket one, and that's what we'll focus part of the conversation today. The second thing we're going to talk about is how Microsoft is thinking about cyber risks and what we're committed to doing. So, we're going to talk about some of the organizations that Microsoft houses internally, but also, promotes and advances on the cyber risks, whether it comes to resiliency or broader security education, and sort of products and services and how we integrate security, and we're thinking about cybersecurity issues writ large. And then finally, we're going to talk about recent developments and how we're working in this space. As I mentioned, we can talk about specific things that Microsoft is doing, like the Cyber Defense Operations Center, the Enterprise Security Group, the Digital Crimes Unit. These are all great initiatives that Microsoft has been doing, both historically and also addressing current issues, but preparing us to really drive leadership on cybersecurity and technology issues in the future. And so all of these are good examples of what's brought together Microsoft's great expertise and the relevant perspective on security topics and cybersecurity offerings into really a one-stop shop in our commitments of what we're doing to secure our customers. And one thing on the, as we look at risks generally with this slide here, to just talk very briefly about my particular background, but there's a lot of time spent on the headlines, the day-to-day on what breaches have occurred and sort of what cyber threats are out there. But it's also really important from Microsoft's perspective to talk about the future and preparing ourselves, particularly in the security space, to deal with broader trends. So this is the evolution of technology, but also staying ahead of the 5 to 10-year trends that Microsoft has seen. And so, as someone who's worked down at the White House and tried and prepared government, for some of the different approaches that they're facing and to being prepared on the global scale to deal with escalating security risks on the cyber front. This is something that sometimes the government is well prepared for, and the other times that private industry is well prepared for. So I really see my role too as sort of bringing the different perspectives together and being helpful in that space as well. So let's talk a little bit about technology trends. So, it feels like every day, and we can talk and stop briefly here about some of the headlines I'm sure folks are focused on and looking at these days, but it seems like every day we open up the newspaper or review different updates online that there's new instances of breaches globally. So, the most recent example, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with again, is Equifax. So you look at something that impacts such a huge range of customers across different business segments, and you have just in the last week or so, you have government intrusions. So this is everything from the various conversations with Kaspersky and NSA and Equifax to more specific conversations about breaches at the SEC or Deloitte. So we're really seeing lots of different headliners and tons of different threats. And so that brings me to my first point here, which is although this 70% number with CEOs will embrace a cloud-first strategy and technology trends, part of that conversation is really about trying to deal with some of the threats we're seeing on a day-to-day basis. And so the numbers we're seeing in 2017 are still very similar, with a very high number of CIOs embracing a cloud-first strategy, again, to deal with some of these security threats. And rather than investing in updating servers, it would make a lot of sense to move data to the cloud, not just from a security perspective, but also from a business sense, because there are a lot of cost savings in doing so. And there are some issues that we can talk through too that people can see, but we're also focused specifically on dealing with hybrid environments. Some companies want to just look at the cloud as a solution, but we also have lots of other customers coming to us where they want to be able to adopt different solutions for hybrid environments. And some companies will have a secondary on-prem solution. So we want to be prepared from Microsoft's standpoint to deal with a lot of these technology trends. The second part of this is that as a customer comes to us and talks about all the different things they have on their desk, I'm looking around here with the different devices on my my space here in my office, but you have a laptop, or you have a mobile device, and you have lots of different interconnected devices and systems that are becoming ubiquitous. So we have huge numbers on the technology trends front. 50 billion devices estimated coming through in the next couple of years that people are dealing with and wanting to connect with their systems. So these are the trends that we're trying to provide solutions for. And getting all of them to work together is really a huge diversity issue from the technology side, and something that we're working closely with. We're also seeing a surge in data volumes, almost 50 times more rather, than we have seen in the past. And so a lot of the customers that Microsoft has been working with and technology trends we're seeing is that customers have huge amounts of data volume requests, and they want to be able to look at that data. We want to be able to see, how is all that data being produced? How do we monetize it? How do we protect it? and what are we doing with it in terms of once it's reached its utility or value, how are we destroying it? So all these key questions are really raising red flags for us. Not red flags, but they're important issues to be able to bake into our products and services moving forward. So when you want to think about what you're doing with data and where the data is going, these are all huge organizational challenge that Microsoft is paying attention to. So let's talk a little bit about the cyber risk environment. And let me pause there very quickly, to ask any questions thus far. If anyone has, go ahead and flag them if you have them on the left. Otherwise, we'll kind of keep thundering through here. On the cyber risk environment, this is something, again, the landscape continues to shift that we feel we've been really prepared for and focused on for some time, but there are always new things that pop up from day-to-day perspective. We know that all the customers and people are interested in managing data and protecting data, and we know that a lot of people are good guys out there and that they're just trying to do what's best for their customers from a business perspective, and they're trying to make the right decisions. But there are a lot of bad actors out there, and a lot of the tactics and entrance vehicles that bad guys are using are changing. There are a lot of types of bad actors, from nation states to hacktivists to lone wolves, and any one of them only have to be once right to get into your environment. As a defender, you've got to be right all the time across your organization. And unfortunately, it just takes one access point to get in, and it becomes very problem to deal with the threats at that point. There's a real asymmetry to the issue. They also have different types of motives. Do they want to blackmail you? Do they want to take information? Do they want to destroy data? There's lots of examples in the past couple of years where companies are having to deal with very aggressive, very sophisticated actors who are coming after their networks and that data. Sony was a good example of this about 18 months ago. Once hackers got inside the networks, they destroyed data, they stole data, and they demanded money in exchange for releasing data. That's something that I know, we've had more recent examples with WannaCry with ransomware, but this is becoming increasingly problematic as actors gain entrance to systems, but also because they just have more resources. Really, Sony was the first example of an attack that there was serious destruction inside a U.S. network, and so we have there's smaller breaches that are problematic from the overall aggregate perspective, but really this was the first of its kind when it came to massive data destruction. There was also a probably lesser known but reported event back at a Saudi gas company in 2012 and 2013 where there was reportedly a nation state actor behind an attack on Aramco, which destroyed 30,000 machines. So as we see these examples in the past, what we're concerned about in the future is more actors on more networks, trying to do things beyond just trying to drag your data away or ask for money. They're actually destroying that data. So to recap, we have lots of different actors, lots of methods, lots of objectives, and they're all enabled by an internet that's meant to help enable communication and enable access rather than protect in some cases from some of these more sophisticated actors. And it's easier to create attacks and impact a target. So with the increasing reliance on the internet and a more dangerous attacks taking place on a day-to-day basis, what does that mean for your business? So there's lots of huge business implications that we're seeing here at Microsoft, and I wanted to present a couple of pieces of data here for you. Let me pause there. Sorry, I'm just looking over at some of our feedback on questions. So you mentioned the Equifax and Deloitte breach. Do you know if Microsoft has had any of its cloud services breached in the last few years? That's a good question, David. What I can do is we have a couple of, on the most recent Microsoft security report, we have a little bit of data on the increasing number of attacks in the cloud. And so I'm happy to point you to that report. And what I can also do is I can speak with Jonathan afterwards, and we can get that report shot over to you because it's got some really rich data and some more specifics on the events we're seeing, particularly in the last 6 months.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share that. Thanks.
That's cool.
And there's one other question that we have right now.
Are tenants vulnerable to other tenants all sharing EOP without input filtering add-ons from other vendors? That's another great question, Marcus. Let me talk with Jonathan about that offline, and we can have a separate chat on that one. So getting back to the business implications, again, let me talk a little bit of statistics here, and then I can walk through each of those very briefly. So 243 median number of days for attackers are present on a victim.
Yeah, problem.
Sorry, go ahead. Okay, I'll just kind of continue. continue on. So the medium number of days attackers are present on a victim network. So what we mean by that is this is when an actor first compromises the network from the time they actually are moving around and then are detected, and then the time, of course, there's mitigation steps put in place until we're able to get that actor out of the space and deal with it in a holistic way. That's a long number of time for folks to be on networks and lots of costs associated with dealing with that. For example, I mean, here someone can get on your network using a phishing scheme, and it's going to take almost, to put it in perspective, 2/3 of the year for an actor to have access to your system for you to even have a sense of what they're doing on this. And again, this is backed up by a lot of research and data that we're happy to talk more about. Looking at the average cost of a data breach to a company, I know that 3.5 million probably doesn't seem like a lot to a major company like a Target. But when you look at this across the scope of different business enterprises, and again, associated with specific incidents, really that cost increases, and it doesn't take into account the business implications, the impact on your reputation, dealing with cleanup and all the other associated things. So, that's something that becomes, as we move forward, looking at some of the broader issues and business implications, we pay quite a lot of attention to and speak with customers about how to deal with that. And, frankly, to work on the cost saving side so that we can drive that number down. But it's very hard to get a sense once a breach happens or ascertain ahead of time how to deal with that and what the total tail of costs will be. And overall, this number is just going to continue to go up. We've seen a 15% increase year on year in those costs. And frankly, again, as actors become more sophisticated, there's more time paid to targeting individual businesses. And, with the things that they can sell in marketplaces and stuff, we'll continue to see that trend increase. Overall, I mean, these are huge numbers. 74% of the world's businesses expect to be hacked in the coming year. These are just overwhelming numbers that a number of different customers and a number of different parties are looking to Microsoft to try to grapple with how to deal not just with an incident handling response, but how to prevent, detect, mitigate steps in the future, and how to protect against your business from the attacks taking place. Globally, we look at the impact of cyber attacks as much as $3 trillion in lost productivity and growth. And again, looking at the trends, this number is only going to grow. These are not just attacks that happen in the US or Europe or Asia. They're all over, and they're going to continue to cause reverberations across both the enterprise level, but also the larger sectors. The number one thing I want to drive home on this slide with all of you is that security is becoming a CEO level issue. Now we're seeing cybersecurity elevated across the board. It doesn't matter the size and scope, frankly, of companies or sectors. This is becoming a board level issue that people are setting up subcommittees to deal with cybersecurity risk. CEOs are having to aggressively step in and manage some of these broader security issues, which 15, 20 years ago, depending upon where you sat, may not have been the case. And then also, we're seeing the responses to incidents and to breaches. Again, Equifax is another good example of there are reverberations across the front of the companies and the C-suite when it comes to dealing with some of the risk issues out there. So these impact all the things we've talked about on the business side, the brand reputation, IP, liability issues, all of these things come into play when we're talking about this. So what I thought I'd talk about a little bit here is giving you a bit of a full perspective and picture over time about how Microsoft has focused on security and how it's evolved as part of our internal processes and how that's informed the products and services that we have created in the marketplace. Microsoft looks to be a partner in overcoming a lot of the security challenges we're talking about. All of the products that we develop, whether they're baked into our current offerings on the security side, or we provide them on the top of stacks, they help and are geared towards protecting the customer. And you look at the trends in the early 2000s, when Microsoft released Windows XP, we realized there were some more vulnerabilities in our customers' security could be at risk. And so that drove the evolution in our thinking about how to address and preserve some of these issues as we started to think about future products. Bill Gates saw the writing on the wall and knew we needed to be seen as a trustworthy company. Otherwise we wouldn't be able to sell products at the pace and scale that we wanted. So when he put the trustworthy computing memo in place in the early 2000s, he said we're going to stand down on all software development and focus on security. All the development stopped and the leadership team came up with a new approach. And one thing they suggested, which has really driven a lot of the evolution of our products, was a security development lifecycle, which meant that a developer could not move a product until it had passed specific security tests. And that really sets Microsoft apart over time with the way we approach security. As we see more and more people turn away from these development cycles of 12 to 18-month deployments to the cloud, we see DevOps that they are writing code. They are writing secure code when some of these guys, are trained and they're actually writing. These are security professionals who are writing code. So they're baking in security best practices. They're baking in security issues at the fundamental part of the coding process. And that's a really important thing that we do here at Microsoft. And you can know as a customer that the code is secure when it's written from the beginning. On top of this, you'll see incidents. If we look across the spectrum here, you'll see some of the pressures that drove some of these decisions. And really kind of these were specific named incidents like I love you code red, to configure, to Stuxnet. And so as we saw the evolution on the bottom of the products and services and our thinking on security, we saw specific responses and events that are helping us to continue to integrate new security threats that we see and make sure that they're baked into our processes. And Microsoft has also developed the Microsoft Active Protection Program, which ships out patches to partners before Patch Tuesday. This was something we learned that Patch Tuesday folks would then turn around and create exploits the next day after the patch was rolled out. So all these things are baked into, and it's an example of the push and pull of the defender-attacker environment that Microsoft is constantly reassessing as part of our overall security posture. And then if you look very quickly here to draw your attention to Windows Azure, in 2009, that was the first time we really got into the cloud. And there's a lot of new technology and security opportunities that come along with this relatively new development. If you look at over the timeline of all the things we developed, that's a pretty recent development to reach into the cloud space. And so it's something that we continue to improve upon and, to improve both the security side, but also obviously the education process to help customers understand why it's a secure environment and how we can address vulnerabilities immediately through our Azure platform. And then in recent years, we've seen government standards, start to embrace and bake into the procurement process, the basic security standards that we've been advocating for some time, and why that's a really important part of the process. And it standardizes the approach from agency to agency, rather than having Microsoft and other partners have to create these different approaches to different customers. So on the improving defenses side, there's lots of different things that we have done from Microsoft's perspective. And I wanted to highlight a few of our overall commitments to cybersecurity. So we built a culture here of strong privacy principles and leading security practices, beginning with, as I mentioned that previous slide, with Bill Gates' memo, all the way throughout the process. And we've doubled down since major events have taken place in the last 4 or 5 years, particularly with the Snowden revelations in 2013. Security is truly a core part of what Microsoft is doing here. Again, not just from a product and service side, but also more broadly to encourage and inform and educate on the process side when it comes to policy debates. We invest deeply in building a trustworthy computing platform and security expertise. If you look at all of the products that are currently in Microsoft's toolkit, whether it's Windows 10 or anything else, it really embodies all of the security learnings over the past years, and we are informed over beyond a decade of serious understanding of the basic security issues that our customers are facing. Really leading on. If you look at Microsoft 10, it truly is the most secure platform that's ever been produced by Microsoft. We also, proactively from our side, we take the fight to, and we'll get to the specifics and sort of what organizations are doing that, but we really do take the fight to cybercrime and advocate extensively for policies and actions that enhance cybersecurity across the board. And this really dovetails nicely with the role that I play here in DC with working with Congress, working with the administration, and working with our industry stakeholders really to drive improvements in overall security posture and to try to combat the aggressive unlawful activities online that we see on a day-to-day basis. And we work closely with law enforcement agencies and with the government to try to improve things like information sharing and to try to combat the threats that we see online. And let me just add one thing. So, from an individual level and from an enterprise and business level, the questions are usually asked us, so what can you do on the cybersecurity front on a day-to-day basis? So I wanted to highlight very quickly a couple of things there that are useful as part of this discussion. Run the latest operating system. It will always have the latest features. And as I mentioned before, Microsoft's most recent iteration, Windows 10, it really truly has a lot of key security features built in. Install the updates when they are pushed out. These updates are pushed out for a reason, and by not operating systems, you leave a hole in your system, and it is very difficult when you look across the vulnerability spectrum out in the overall ecosystem. This is a key thing that we continue to reinforce and educate folks about, that this is such a critical component of your cybersecurity arsenal to make sure that you're installing updates when you can. Whitelisting also helps, and it's something I think that we want to list here, which is helping ensure your employees are not installing applications that don't comply with your system standards. This is important at the both at the CIO level, but frankly across the enterprise, to make sure you know what your employees are doing and that they're following protocols and standards as appropriate. It also helps ensure that you're only downloading applications that you can trust, which is a huge component of, and very important. Also, lastly, the multi-factor authentication and creating privileged accounts. The move away from passwords is, I think, again, one of the trends that we've been seeing in updating folks on, and also, things like using Windows Azure app on your phone. Passwords can certainly be defeated, and it's critical that, as I think overall as an ecosystem, both on the business side, but also from a technology standpoint, that we're continuing to understand that passwords can be defeated. And you got to constantly think from a business perspective about who needs access to what, and reinforcing that with your own employees. So I thought I'd take a quick break here from just the overall and give you a sense of the two organizations that are driving some of the, I think, innovations and bringing to bear the security resources that Microsoft has internally. And one of those is the Microsoft Cyber Defense Operations Center. So, some of the key components there are on the screen for all of you to take a look at. And I really would encourage you, and I'm happy to work with Jonathan afterwards to get you some of the updated slide briefs specifically that's made public from Microsoft from the CDOC. But they have a great strategy of pulling in resources and defending on a day-to-day basis. Microsoft has great access to a global network of information and data points where we're pulling information in real time constantly, and we're protecting networks and individuals and enterprises and businesses all day long. And so this is a key success for us. It's been set up over about a year or so, beyond a year. That it's been working well, and this is a great example of what we're doing to try to keep up with the threat and frankly go on offense and learning more and collecting intelligence, but also and understanding what's going on in the ecosystem and responding appropriately. The other one I wanted to highlight for all of you is Microsoft's Digital Crimes Unit. So this is what I mentioned earlier about a key engagement with law enforcement partners. We are working aggressively, particularly in the botnet space, to understand the environment globally about botnets, and also mitigate some of the overall impacts, both to Microsoft customers, but overall to the ecosystem as well. And so this is another great example, and I encourage all of you, I'm more happy to get you some more materials on it, but this is a great success story from Microsoft's perspective. We've been heavily involved in supporting law enforcement agencies taking down some of the major botnets over the years, Zeus being one of them. And it's something that we continue to educate folks on who don't even, in a lot of cases, particularly from the government side, are still learning the capabilities that Microsoft has. And we think this is a key success story in that space. So what are the security and privacy innovations? And let me just pause again really quickly and see if there are any additional questions before I move on.
Any questions? And if you'd like to ask a question, just please identify yourself before you ask one, or you can type one into the box. Thank you, Ryan.
So I'll just work through a couple more slides, and we're almost at the end here too. So on the security and privacy innovations and I think this is important because thematically, this is how Microsoft really truly thinks about security. And again, it's not just evident in our products and services, but also culturally, we frame issues in a very specific way, informed by a lot of history and on the topic. On the security and transparent foundation side, so we believe the security lifecycle is an example of how we build security from the beginning of development of our products. I discussed a little bit with you on the DevOps side, but having security built into the fundamental parts of coding, but also more importantly, as we go throughout the evolution of a product lifestyle, we go through testing security implications of certain products and services. It's really core about what we do fundamentally as an organization and culturally. We also promote initiating with trust. So these are examples of once things are introduced inside of your organization, and not just data, but also individual devices. These are things that we make sure that we're paying attention to at the very beginning of the process. So there's examples of this like BitLocker and encrypted devices. All of these things matter with how you're introducing and initiating trust inside your environment to making sure that you can rely on what's connected and what's going on. We also focus on preventing breaches from the beginning. These are boundary related issues. It's much harder sometimes once an attacker gets inside, as I mentioned earlier, to be able to deal with that attacker on your network, find out what's going on, and also separate ordinary routine business activity from more nefarious activity. And so, we focus a lot on making sure whoever comes into our environment, we know who they are and can authenticate that person. So Azure is a great example of this on the Azure authentication scheme that we use. Another important point is we, assume and detect breaches. This is look, we understand that although we want to focus on knowing who's coming into our environment, there's a lot of attention, and we pay a lot of attention, devote a lot of resources to recognizing that, look, once people get in, we have to find mechanisms to root them out, and to help all of our customers and partners deal with that. And so initiating and limiting new mechanisms to track down nefarious activity, but also limiting the time that intruders are on your networks is a core component of what we're focused on the security innovation side. And then lastly, to contain, mitigate, and remediate, these are, of course, the core principles that any security official will tell you are important once you do find threats and how to get them cleaned off the environment. And so all of those are kind of core parts of how we view security and privacy innovations. And so one of the other key issues that I wanted to just raise here at the end is, the move to the cloud is of course a huge part of what Microsoft is focused on and doing. We think it's an important part of the of technology trends and evolution, and a core part of what Microsoft both is well positioned for and prepared for, and doing a great job on a day-to-day basis to present and adopt and roll out the cloud ecosystem, and to build trust overall in what we're doing to address the issue. And so I want to leave you with a couple of the trusted cloud principles, because that's really a core component and a prioritized effort on our part that Microsoft's involved with. We just want to flag a couple of things in the way we look at it. Again, if you look at security principles, these are sort of the same sort of principles specific to cloud that we are working very closely with partners and customers to do. And so security, again, it's pretty straightforward since we've had that discussion: privacy and control, compliance and transparency. All of these core components are wrapped in and baked in from the very, very beginning of our solutions that we present when a customer comes to us and has a specific enterprise need, or is looking to roll out cloud based upon whatever environment, whether it's hybrid or just straight cloud. All of these things we make sure that we are discussing with them, and they're a core component of what we're doing to build trust in what Microsoft's presenting on a day-to-day basis. And so I wanted to leave you with a couple of key resources if you have any interest or more questions about some of the specific things I talked about today. We're definitely open and willing to talk more about any specific items that you had, or questions about items you had today, or if there's really specific just interest items that you want to reach out to, happy to do that too. So with that kind of concludes the webinar, but I'd open it up for everyone for conversation and questions.
Great, thank you, Jacob. If anybody has questions, please type them in to the conversation, or if you want to ask a question, please identify yourself. There's one question I wanted to ask just to start off while we're waiting for questions, and that's so Jacob, in your role as for the past several months, there's been some public policy issues that I think you've been focused on. Can you just touch upon maybe one or two of the top kind of issue areas or things you're working on from a public policy standpoint? If you're still there.
Yeah, sorry about that, Jonathan. So yeah, one of the key issues that I think we've been talking a lot about with Congress and the executive branch has been the implications of IoT security and sort of what that looks like. We think this is obviously an issue where a lot of enterprises and organizations are starting to wrap their minds around that a lot of devices, both now and quickly moving into the future, are going to have security implications and privacy implications are going to have broad-based policy implications across the global environment. And so we've been working a lot on trying to reinforce our perspectives on that issue. And I think it's something that all of you, more importantly, as you adopt different devices and sort of as things become more connected, it's something you're starting to think about as an organization. So that's one of them. Another issue we've been talking about is overall is helping encourage the government to adopt at the basic level the procurement and standardized process on the security model from the very beginning of procurement and acquisition. So we've been working on IT modernization with the government right now to try to help them understand some of the again technology trends associated with upgrades and overall issues that security has been baked into the new evolution of products and services. And so that's an ongoing process, but we think we're doing a very good job with I think overall engaging on that issue as well. And those are kind of some of the big picture key issues I'm thinking about these days. The other is information sharing is a critical component I think overall of understanding the threat environment that all of us are sort of facing collectively in the ecosystem. And so we continue to work with government agencies and lots of other partners and stakeholders on trying to make sure everyone has as much information they need to protect their own networks and overall to reinforce security inside the ecosystem. So kind of the big picture policy things I've been working on lately.
Great. Thank you, Jacob. We do have a question from Marcus. Can you share the need for third-party protection add-ons as you see it necessary using Azure or Office 365?
Yeah, I mean, this is an issue. Again, we can talk more about offline, but it's certainly something that we've been looking at and focused on, and I think it's probably worth, Jonathan, a separate conversation on that one as well.
Okay. Any other questions? Jacob, if people want to reach you, we could talk about like sharing your email, the best way to reach you if people have offline questions. Oh, there's one last question. How is the White House doing on cybersecurity?
No, I mean, look, I think overall, the administration definitely understands, and I think like any administration would, frankly, that this is an issue that is a priority issue for everyone globally, not just for the U.S. But the White House is focusing on making sure they have the resources, at least in my conversations, to address the issue. And so far, I think they take it seriously. That cybersecurity should be, not just a private sector issue or government issue, but we really have to approach it holistically. And beyond that, I guess it's soon, and we'll see.
Great. Thank you. We'll do one last question, or well, we have two last questions here, so we'll do two last questions here, and then we'll wrap up. This is from Richard. I use Microsoft OneDrive. What's being done to prevent ransomware from encrypting cloud data?
Again, these are security products and services. We can talk more about our cloud folks. I think we can take those questions directly to them and have them give a longer answer.
Okay.
You guys ask so collectively for everyone on the phone calls, you guys are asking great specific questions, and I want to bring in, as I mentioned, my my matchmaker role. We have some deep expertise on a couple of these, and I want to get you an in-depth answer. So
Okay.
I'll take
So
these,
we'll
I'll take these
follow
questions
up and as I send out the follow up to this webinar. So that's great. Thank you, Jacob. Final question. Secure Score has been a tremendous asset to us and for our clients. Are there any other similar resources you can recommend for MSPs to leverage? And again,
Yeah,
go ahead.
we'll send Frank, we'll send you a couple of links there. I've got a few here I can dig up. Yep.
Great. All right, we'll do that. All right, great. Jacob, do you mind advancing to, one more slide then for our wrap up? So,
Yeah.
so as many of you know, Voices for Innovation, we're not only a community that tries to bring people together for education purposes on our products and services. And thank you again, Jacob, for running through all this today. That was a lot of great information that you covered. But we're also, Voices for Innovation is also a community that advocates on public policy issues. And I wanted to call your attention to something that we're launching today. And Jacob mentioned a little bit about this, about procurement. And we're launching a petition around procurement reform for cybersecurity. So one of our VFI leaders, Devel Bonnet, some of you know him. He's CEO of Access Smart and a great thought leader on cybersecurity. He has been talking with us and advocating for a while about the need for the GSA to have specific codes dedicated to cybersecurity products and services. So right now, if you're working in government and you go to the GSA to purchase products or services specifically geared towards cybersecurity, they don't have anywhere where you can tune in and go find that information. There are no codes associated with this. So this is something that Dovel's been advocating for a while. He's talked to members of Congress about this, and he's talked with us about this. He's talked internally at Microsoft about this as well. He's very passionate about it. And this is an issue that, will help small businesses in government procurement if there are specific codes that they can offer their products and services around. So today we are launching a petition that I'd like to encourage everyone to sign, to go to Congress to ask them to advocate to the GSA to create these codes. And I'm really, pleased that it's being brought to us by one of our VFI leaders, Dovel. And we want to work with all of you on encouraging you, one, to sign it, and two, if you know others who would be interested in signing this, to share with them as well. So I will send out a link to everyone in the wrap up on this call. Encourage you to go to the Voices for Innovation website and sign the petition. So thank you for that. Thank you for your support. Thank you for joining the call today. We really appreciate it. Jacob shared his email with everyone. So if you have some offline questions, again, Jacob is a great matchmaker, so he'll be there to help you. So with that, I'm going to wrap up the call. Thank you for joining today. Jacob, thank you again for your time. Great presentation. We really appreciate it. And I wish everyone a great rest of your day. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.